Hello everyone, my name is David Gay, and thank you very much for watching the 12th episode of David Needs a Job. Okay, today is a history lesson. Yeah, a history lesson in the middle of summer. Last thing you want to hear is some guy teaching the history between the months of June, July, and August. But don't worry, it's a short history lesson and you'll understand why I brought it up in just a few moments. At the beginning of the 20th century, there existed in the United States something called the Eugenics Movement. And that movement was based on the writings and publications of Sir Francis Galton, who happened to be not only an amateur scientist, but a cousin to Charles Darwin. Based on the scientific writings of Sir Francis Galton, the eugenics movement believed that the health, well-being, and stability of society was based on membership, specifically the number of good men that existed at the time. Now, what does good men mean? Well, good men means exactly the way it sounds. Good as in healthy and disease-free, good as in well-behaved and law-abiding, good as in wealthy, good as in anything that we would normally consider today as good, the opposite of bad. Now, having said this, the movement believed that the more good men that existed, the better society and the human race would be down the road. Crime would fall, disease would be eradicated, everyone would have money, it would be almost like a utopia. So if proponents of the American Eugenics Movement believed that the more good men existed in society, the better society would be, where would they get these good men from? Well, this is where the history lesson becomes a biology lesson. They first of all believed that people who were considered good had a list of attributes and traits that were considered positive, meaning if this person had all of these traits, that would make them considered to be a good man or a good person. Taking that logic forward, if more of these good people were to breed, the children of the pairing would also have the common traits. Therefore, they would grow up and be good men and women. Sounds like the proponents of the American Eugenics Movement had it all figured out, didn't they? What a noble, wonderful line of thinking. Bring in more good people, we bring in a wonderful society for the future. But there were a lot of problems with that line of thinking that ultimately ended that movement within a few decades. The problem that they had, first of all, was the identification of positive attributes and traits that made a person good. And not only that, they had to ensure that these traits and attributes were hereditary, passed from one generation to another. And when they started compiling the list together, they thought they were doing it in a scientific way, but they were bringing in things such as beauty and wealth and intelligence. Now, intelligence is not necessarily a natural thing. There's nurture as well. For example, you could be a slow learner, but if you live in a household full of loving people who expose you to knowledge and information and make sure that you understand, doesn't matter how many times it takes for you to understand something, you are going to be a very intelligent person. On the flip side of that, if you had the genetics, the wiring to be intelligent, but you live in a disruptive family life, you have abusive parents who did not help you bring that attribute to life, to maturation, you're not going to be an intelligent person simply because that particular attribute was never expressed, was never allowed to flower. Other flaws in the line of thinking had very sinister overtones. For example, if you were trying to filter the breeding so that only those people who actually bred had positive attributes and traits, it stood to reason that you were going to filter out, strain out those people that did not have those traits, that had undesirable traits that would not make them a good person. And the proponents of the American Eugenics Movement had a term for that. That term, believe it or not, was called defectives. Defectives, in the mind and view of the proponents of the eugenics movement, were those people who were feeble-minded, who were physically frail, though there was nothing wrong with them, those who were mentally or physically challenged, and in some cases, even from identifiable groups based on race and ethnicity. And just to let you know how far the American Eugenics Movement got before it finally lost wind and petered out, several states in America passed legislation that mandatorily required people identified as defectives to be sterilized. While the American Eugenics Movement died after a few decades, the National Socialist Party of Germany took the foundations of that movement and made their own spin of it, and we won't go into too much detail as to how they did their version of eugenics. History has spoken for itself. So now you're probably wondering, since this is supposed to be a video series about looking for work and job searches, why I'm bringing up such a depressing topic such as the eugenics movement of America. Well, it's in response to something that Thane Burnett did. He's a columnist in the Toronto Sun, and this happens to be the Monday, July 8th issue of the paper. He went to have his genome checked for any potential genetic flaws that might cause him problems down the road. Now, this science of having the genome checked comes from the research done by the Human Genome Project that recently successfully mapped the entire genome of the human being. And he found some potential problems. Now, I don't know what he covered in the second part of the series because we had a big downpour of rain in Toronto, and that prevented from my newspaper from being delivered on Tuesday. So I don't know what he brought up in his second part of his findings in his column. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was to discuss what I'm about to talk about today. And that's the real reason why I put together this episode. The Human Genome Project and the science that comes from it has the potential to have on file the complete genome of every man, woman, and child that lives in this world, including myself, including you watching right now. Now, you probably, this sort of stuff this sort of knowledge is like a two-edged sword. On one side, having that knowledge of what will go wrong with you due to your genetics will come in handy because you can prepare for it. If you have a predisposition toward cancer or diabetes or macular degeneration, I think it would be good on one side to know. And do be prepared to watch out for any warning signs with the help of your family doctor. On the other side of this double-sided blade is, do you really want to know? Are you comfortable in knowing that sometime down the road you will have a predisposition to get certain types of diseases? Do you want to know if you get Alzheimer's or some form of dementia? Do you want to know if you're going to have a hearing problem or a vision problem down the road? I'm not sure I want to know. I'm the type of person that lives for today, make sure everything gets done. I'm a deed speak kind of guy. Tomorrow comes and I will deal with whatever comes tomorrow. In addition to that, since we can now quantify something about us and store it somewhere for us to look at, to review, and to make informed decisions on, it's also possible because it now exists in a storable form that people other than yourself can have access to that information. And before you think, oh, wait a minute, no one is ever going to have knowledge of that sensitivity without my permission, well, think again. How many insurance companies, for example, have access to medical information that is before the Human Genome Project? For those of you with a past police or criminal record who are watching this video right now, you're no doubt keenly aware that your past offenses and record is not only shared by local and international law enforcement agencies, but also other agencies, other organizations, even corporations, including the company that you might be applying to a job for right now. I believe down the road that the science of the Human Genome Project will not only become refined and streamlined and calibrated enough to produce information about you and I in a faster manner. I also believe it would become encapsulated, made portable, and easily shareable in some sort of database. And I believe the contribution to that database will no longer be a choice such as what Thane Burnett did, but a mandatory requirement, not just for those people who are born, but for those people like myself who are currently living. Proponents of a genome database will argue that thanks to the Human Genome Project, there will be a database that will allow researchers to identify diseases of a genetic origin so that doctors and other practitioners can target medical treatment and healthcare costs to specific trends down the road. But remember, like the American Eugenics Movement, things were born of noble intentions for the betterment of society, only to be used in such a horrible way that many people suffered. And I believe that that information, if it becomes accessible to many people, there will be genetic discrimination, including those people who are looking for work. What is to stop a hiring manager from discriminating against a person who has a predisposition toward cancer or a predisposition toward age-related dementia like Alzheimer's? And the scary part of all of this is that unlike racial or gender discrimination, genetic discrimination is a very, very hard fight to win. And I hope that that information never becomes available to any hiring managers. We as job seekers have enough of a challenge just trying to find a job with whatever perceived flaws they may find in us without having to deal with something as damaging as a genome that just doesn't fit with the corporate culture. That's my episode for today. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch David Needs a Job, and I look forward to seeing you next episode. Have yourself a good day. Bye for now.